And the money that's raised from this carbon price or carbon tax is then recycled back into the community in one way, shape or form. About half of it will go back into what's called household assistance. So the government has estimated how much extra households will pay in their daily, weekly bills and said, righto, you get a bit of a tax break, so you get some money back. And so about $15 billion is going back into households, and that covers about 90% of households, they say. A huge chunk goes back into industry assistance, and this gives you a sense of that I'm not from the government. We think far too much money is going back to industry. In some cases, some of these big polluters are getting 95% of they're not liable in the first few years for 95% of what they will be liable in the future. So they can actually get a lot of stuff. They can still continue to pollute, basically, for a little while. And then that changes over time. They'll lose that compensation. But that's all about bringing, especially the trade-exposed industries, about bringing them into the schemes in a softly way. There's a little bit of money for energy efficiency and clean energy, and then there's these land and biodiversity measures. So you remember I said that biodiversity fund, that's about $1 billion over 6 years. The rest, the $700 and some million, is divided up into a whole range of little funds. A good chunk of it is going into research and development of low emissions farming. A big chunk of it, about $400 and some million. There's money going into helping catchment management authorities revise their plans so they make sure that carbon forestry goes where it's supposed to go and doesn't go where it's going to cause more damage. There's money going into Indigenous organisations to help them participate. There's money going into extension and outreach programs like the one you're attending today. And there's about $250 million going into soil carbon and other areas that are still really uncertain, so they're putting money into that because they think that's a good thing. When you hear about environmental things, we're used to hearing about them as grants programs, that they take taxpayers' money and they give us some of it in little dribs and drabs. This is a market. And it's a market that's created by governments, but it is a market. And it will play according to those market rules set up by the government, but it is a market. And that's really important to understand, because there will be risks and opportunities like any other market. It will change over time like any other market. There will be honest brokers like any other market, and there will be snake oil salesmen like any other market. It's a market. There's a commodity called carbon that is now being traded. The Australian market will link to the international market. The Australian price will track very closely with the international price. It will go up and down. We'll be able to trade internationally and trade it amongst ourselves. The only difference is that some sectors of the economy are liable for their emissions, are liable for their carbon, and the land sector is not. So it can feed into the market, it can supply the market, but it is not subject to the demand, if you like. It is perhaps the most ambitious scheme in the world, and by ambitious I mean in terms of its scope. There are theoretically a very broad range of activities that could be eligible for this carbon farming initiative. That is to say, on farm you can do a whole range of things. And there are other such schemes around the world. There's one in New Zealand, one of the most famous is in Alberta. In Canada, the Californians are starting up one as part of their scheme. But they tend to be a little bit narrower. They're being a little bit more timid than we are. We're actually saying from the word go, right, if you can come up with a rigorous way of accounting for the carbon that you say you're sequestering in the land or not emitting into the atmosphere, then we will tick that off and you can start generating credits. It aims to balance environmental integrity with broad participation. In other words, they're trying to do the right thing by what the community expects. You know, they're trying to say, if you say you're going to deal with X tons of carbon, then we want to know you're actually dealing with X tons of carbon. We want to see the paperwork. So the environmental integrity part is the paperwork. That's the headache. And the broad participation, well, they're trying to get as many people as possible to participate. And the tension between those two will not always be comfortable. And so there are a number of hurdles that have to be cleared for you to participate in the scheme, and they look really, really onerous, and they do take quite a bit of time, and you will need advice from people like lawyers and others. But once they're cleared, you can participate. And they really want you to participate. So if you put forward an idea and it's rejected, they have undertaken, they being the government, have undertaken to help you through where you went wrong and to redesign it so that you can participate within reason. So there will be there is something called the Domestic Offsets Integrity Committee. The DOIC is a panel of independent experts that will vet each application for participation in the Carbon Farming Initiative. And so you will, if you choose to participate, you will either use what's called an existing methodology or you will develop your own methodology. And those methodologies will be approved by the DOIC and then approved by the Minister. So they'll be ticked off. There are about 4 methodologies on the books now and more in the pipeline for a whole range of different things. Anyone with carbon rights can participate. And in Victoria, landholders have the rights to the carbon in their soil and their vegetation, and utility owners and also any landholder. And it is entirely voluntary. So really, I'm topping and tailing this. It's a market and you don't have to participate. There's no penalty if you don't participate. If you do participate, make sure you've done your homework, and good luck to you. And I think that there will probably be a situation where, at the beginning at least, most people don't participate. I think things will go quite slowly. It'll take a little time for people to come on board. But for those who do come on board, I think that there will be, they will have done their homework and decided, well, the opportunities outweigh the risks here, and we want to give this a go. But the important thing is you don't have to join in.